Welcome back to Unplugged and Unstoppable, the podcast for awakened people who are done playing small, done explaining themselves, and done waiting for permission. I'm Robin Campbell, and if you're new here, this is where we talk about the only thing that actually matters: building a life on your own terms, outside their system and on your timeline. Today's guest stopped me in my tracks. Our paths crossed around about 2017-18, I'm guessing, with the channel Brian Stavely. Massive shout out to Brian, who was doing a My Awakening series. And I think both and I were on roughly the same sort of 6-month period. And that's how Beth came across my radar. And then I saw her on a Steve Falconer podcast where I learned way more about what she's doing today. So Beth Martens is a pattern hunter, an archetype whisperer, a founder of the House of Free Will, and after trading her corporate VP life and a close call with cancer for a deep dive into archetypes and deprogramming, she spent over 2 decades helping creators and truth lovers uncover the inner patterns that shape their lives and work. Through her coaching, trainings, courses and podcasts, King Hero's Journey and Beth of Fresh Air, she supports people in reclaiming their sacred purpose, their well-being and their creative freedom. Her book is called Journey, A Map of Archetypes. And if you've ever felt like you're a rebel who doesn't know where to point the fire, or a nurturer who's quietly burning yourself and giving to everyone else, this conversation is going to land somewhere deep. Beth is not just my guest today. She is in many ways the person I'm building this whole thing for personally. And she's a few steps ahead of where many of you are standing right now. So settle in, this one is going to count. Beth Martens, welcome to Unplugged and Unstoppable. How are you doing?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me. What a great intro. I should hire you.
Thanks, Beth. Now, particularly when I saw you on Steve Falconer's podcast, I really learned about kind of how you work, a little bit about how you work, but I'd love to dive a lot deeper on that today, especially about the book. And your book opens up running back into the cancer ward, not as a patient this time, but as a musician hired for artists in healthcare. And your oncologist barely acknowledges you. And that's a key moment, I think, in the book. What does that moment tell us about the medical system's relationship with soul healing, and why is that still relevant today?
Yeah, it was a complete disconnect. That moment was very poignant for me when my oncologist literally did not care how I survived after telling me I wouldn't survive. So I'm all innocent and happy and like, oh, look at me, I'm not dead. And he's like, yeah, whatever, I have to go somewhere right now. I said, don't you remember me? Yeah, he said, yes, I do.
So just set the scene, if you don't mind. Yeah, because that's a really key point. So give us a bit of background as to why you ended up there and your diagnosis, because you talk about that in the book. You were a VP of a company traveling to India, doing everything right.
Yeah, well, yeah, supposedly doing everything right. I did think that, and now I know a lot more. But I was working with my family's business. I'm a rebel at heart, so we're in really good company here together. And yet I saw how that rebel archetype was a nemesis in my life. It got me in a lot of trouble. You know, I had a night in jail as a teenager and several bouts of running away and, you know, stole a car, all kinds of madness that, of course, didn't get me anywhere and even set me back. So by the time I hit my adulthood, I had graduated university and, you know, with a gold medal in anthropology, there was no prospect for me to earn a living. And so I traveled to India. I started doing some cultural exchange work. I didn't work in India, but I worked in Nepal in a school and helped to build a school traveling. They literally have to walk 8 hours up to this mountain village in Nepal. And so getting home, I was still lost after that. And I had always worked with my family's business just as a means for some financial freedom, a particular love for their business that I knew of. And at that point, I decided, okay, Beth, put your rebel a little bit to sleep here. I need to just get on with life, fit in with society. I had by that point, I had a taste for the Eastern arts. I found a teacher in India for better and for worse, lots of worse also. And so I had this hunger to go and, you know, but I didn't have the money to do it. So I came to my dad. I said, I will go and I'm going to do a degree and train to work with you. And that's when he told me that I will train you and I will pay you to train you. So it became a kind of mentorship. I'm super grateful for that, regardless of the outcome. That was pretty not good, but that was a very deep relationship for my father and I. And I was 8 or 9 years into that. It nickel and dimed me out of my health due to stress, due to meaninglessness. This is, I put that word in the subtitle of my book, because, we were working so hard and I was always giving my all. There was one project I worked 48 hours in a row to complete without sleep, without eating properly. And, and then it's like, what is that for? Because all they're doing is like a corporation eating everything alive and producing nothing of true value. So yeah, I was really praying for a way out of that. And then be careful what you pray for, because, I didn't think I could just leave with loyalty to my family. And I bought a house, I had a mortgage. It seemed all kind of locked in my life at that time.
Sure.
And then
So
I had a
ahead.
and then I had a full stop diagnosis of a stage 4 lymphoma, which I didn't even expect. And that was my ticket out. I let that be the reason that I stopped that work and never returned.
Could you overlay some of the context here of your awakening journey? Were you questioning things well before this and struggling to keep one foot in the system and one foot out? Like, give us an idea of your awakening journey and how that worked out.
With that strong rebel archetype, it's as long as I can remember.
Okay.
In my childhood, my first word was no. And I was always the elephant in the room, or I could always see the elephant in the room. I probably even appeared to be one as well. And I was never shy to point out what wasn't right, what wasn't working, what wasn't logical. I remember the horror of every Easter waking up to a dead person in the Philippines hanging on a cross, and, just always questioning things that normal people didn't do, my family didn't do. So, having said that, I still, even though I had an internal strong rebel, I really didn't awaken, if you can call it, to say the agendas in the world until 2015. My father passed away and a lot of relationships started developing. Things started coming to my awareness. I started opening my eyes, and instead of running with blinders on, let myself see more of what was going on in the world. And then not 2 years later, almost like just about 2 years later, my mom also passed away. And that was the real turning point for me, because I had someone come into my world that was a victim of satanic ritual abuse, very organized, networked. She was, as a teenager, then after a lot of child abuse, she was trafficked in all kinds of political arenas, royal arenas, to Buckingham Palace and all this kind of. So again, my eyes had to open. There was somebody there who picked me to help her. I would never have advertised myself like I can do that. That was very interesting. People come forward that had been very severely victimized in that world.
Wow.
And so that started me tumbling down the truther rabbit hole. Yeah. And then I'll just quickly say, it wasn't until 2020, or more like 2019, that I began to speak out, created the King Hero's Journey podcast, as you mentioned. And then, the devastation of 2020 was phenomenal.
Yeah, we were all going through that together. And I think as a community, we kind of joined loosely through Brian in the years preceding that. So 2018, 19, I think.
Exactly.
So could you give me an insight as to why do you think, on reflection, these people were coming to you? Was this a talent that you had, that you knew you had, or something they saw in you?
They obviously saw it more in me. And yes, just yesterday I was speaking with another person who reached out to me with similar background. So it's funny, because I literally was just thinking about this, and I don't necessarily have a belief in past lives, but it did kind of point towards something like that. And I've been through healing experiences that I have no memory of any kind of that stuff. I have full memory of my childhood, or at least as full as is normal. I don't have any sense that I've been through that kind of thing in this life, but perhaps other parallel lives or past lives, or just a deep empathy for Here's the thing is that I've been through a lot of suffering, and suffering is, in fact, what we grow through. I held an ideal that we don't have to grow that way, but it really actually is the path. It's through friction, it's through intensity, it's through things that will capture your attention in such a profound way that you can't look past. You can't just go along. And so I think that's why they identified me, because otherwise, you can go and sit in front of a therapist or another coach or something, but if they haven't themselves suffered, how can they possibly even conceive of how to help you? So I think that's it. And I still will never hang my shingle that way. I actually prefer to work with people, and this is no knock against anybody, but that have already done a great deal of healing work on themselves, and they've become disillusioned with the world, and they're ready for the depths that I like to go to.
That is beautiful, because I can see more and more people doing what you and I have done or doing, which is disconnect from mainstream constructs. You're fully awake now. You're not going to go back. And now you have to make sense of where you could go and build a new life. It's about designing with that purpose in mind. So do you mind trying to fill a few gaps for me? You got your diagnosis, and describe your treatment and how you came through that experience.
Yeah, so the rebel in me had already researched a lot of natural health stuff, and I had developed a belief system actually around natural health. So I rejected my doctor's advice to go into what they thought was going to be radiation at that point. It turns out I didn't qualify for it. But so I dove into all kinds of natural health things. I started educating myself more deeply. I moved across the country to work with a naturopath that many people come from around the world to do cancer treatments with him. I had some good experiences where I leveled off. I wasn't getting sicker for a few months, and then all of a sudden I started to nosedive, and it was my naturopath that sent me back home here in Winnipeg to do the conventional treatments. And so by that point, I surrendered to it. What I had been doing didn't work. I untold amounts of money doing that. I ended up losing my house over it because none of that is covered in Canada. And then so I ended up, like I said, disqualified from radiation because it was a systemic cancer. They can't just like zap one place and expect to bring about any shift or change. So instead, they gave me chemotherapy. I went through 11 months of consistent chemotherapy. That nearly killed me, right? The drugs are sheer poison. There's really nothing good about it. Yes, they do kill cancer. They kill everything, especially fast-growing cells. And so I was near dead at that point, and I, in fact, had a near-death experience where I felt to be dying. I checked out. I went to some other side and was very profoundly affected by the fact that there I was, even without what I considered to be my body intact. All of my life had fallen apart, but I saw myself so clearly that I was independent of my flesh, my bones, my thoughts, my circumstances. And so that was a major awakening, which did bring me into so-called remission, but still very, debilitated. And in 18 months, I couldn't recover. I was diagnosed again with the second diagnosis of the same cancer, which they considered to be terminal. They offered me a stem cell transplant. I went into chemo again for another, every single day for 5 weeks, which was a terrible mistake. And then they tried to get me to do a stem cell transplant, which I discovered only half the people survive or half the people die doing. And that was the turning point for me to see, what is killing me? I did think I was doing everything right, but not even close. Now I'm way more educated about that. In fact, I used to say I healed from cancer, but now I say I survived it, and I'm still very much cleaning up the mess of that.
Okay.
And so I turned away. I turned that stem cell transplant down, ultimately by facing my death again, allowing it to happen, realizing that if I was making an error in my choice, if this was my time, I accepted and I surrendered to death. And then that was also the time when I was deep into the study of archetypes, just as an intuitive hunch, okay, nothing else has worked. And so I need to go and get deeper into this. What is it that's pulling the life out of me? And I was able to discover that the rebel archetype right on point was right at the top of the heap. It wasn't all of it by any stretch of the imagination. Again, very huge subject, big subject that you don't really get to the bottom of. But I was able to release enough layers of the shadow of that archetype to go from dying to living practically overnight.
Amazing.
And, against the odds, I was hosted within a couple of months to a nurses' oncology conference because they don't see people survive.
Amazing.
And so I was special. And they wanted to show me off that I
amazing?
survived this ordeal.
So you talk about a near-death experience. I've been fascinated with that subject recently. So at this point, Beth, I'd love to introduce the concept of the 8 archetypes, which in your book and the journey, you talk about the child, the rebel, the warrior, the nurturer, the lover, the hedonist, the king, and the alchemist. And so far you've mentioned the rebel, and it all maps onto something called the hero's journey. Let's just set the scene now and just talk about that, because you're referring to the rebel, and it'd be great to have some context.
Yes, exactly. The hero's journey is, in and of itself, it's an archetype, and it contains many of these sub-archetypes. So I took full license to find this inside myself, recognizing that a lot of people write from different perspectives around the hero's journey, around archetypes, around different archetypes. And so with that rebel nature, I gave myself license to do the inward study. This was always my way, not to go and research and memorize other people's findings and information, but I only want what I can prove inside myself, and then ideally, in other people as well, because otherwise then if I can swear a little bit, then I don't want what's fake and gay. I don't want ideas. I don't want beliefs. And so that's where the hero's journey starts, with the child archetype that can get addicted to beliefs. And rather than waking up to reality, allowing reality to shock them and come awake and be aware and take in, like, how bad is this situation actually? Not try to rose-color glass or over things or escape and deny out of ultimately a fear of dying. But the child is called to the deepest mission of all, although it could be argued they're all equally deep, that God is calling them on their hero's journey. And what that means to me is to create a life of meaning and purpose and service. And so that's very overwhelming to the child. But if they are done with their suffering in that capacity, because there's 2 kinds of suffering. There's the suffering that is meaningless and purposeless, and then there's the suffering that's full of meaning and full of purpose. And that's the shift that allows the child to move forward into that rebel archetype. And when you awaken, you might notice the first thing that you might get is mad, angry at all of the injustice, all of the lies inside yourself, lies out there. And so the rebel gets next level energy and starts to be able to speak out, to say no, to rail against the machine would be more of a shadow, but to just speak the truth and to lead in the truth and to have that highest value of freedom. They are tasked to understand, what does freedom mean? The shadow rebel is going to say freedom means you can do whatever you want and nobody rules you. This is very wrong knowledge. This is absolutely wrong knowledge. And if there's any message that I can get out to the sovereignty community, it's that's not where freedom is. It's a certain kind of freedom. I have a lot of that kind of freedom. People don't tell me what to do. I make all my own trouble. As a self-employed person, we can talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Later. Then so that rebel, if they find their cause and they become a rebel with a purpose rather than purposeless, that moves them forward into the work of the warrior.
The rebel archetype is fascinating because you write about it, that suppressing it nearly killed you, literally. Exactly. You describe the rebel as someone who channels righteous anger into needed change. For the people listening, many of you whom are done explaining themselves or done debating, done fighting battles, and that drains you, like it did with me with my protesting and activism. How do you know when your rebel energy is finally pointing in the right direction?
It's what do I want to say? It's about energy. So energy is the marker. So Now, there's a difference between fake energy and real life energy. Fake energy is what the rebel shadow gets addicted to. They like getting people mad. They like shocking people. They like being the contrary because everybody's all, gets all weirded out about that. They like that. But the real life energy is where you feel full, you feel alive, and you have that desire to serve. How can my bravery, right? I was one of those that spoke out in 2020. There were many that didn't. They didn't have that rebel kind of thing. So, to use that, I called it righteous anger, but I might even edit that if I was to rewrite that book, which I won't. I'm going to only move forward. But, so it's not really anger at that stage. It's off the map. It's a rising up of energy that comes as if from somewhere else. And it works more through you rather than you having a whole head full of hot air and needing to, shift people, change them, kill them is actually a very unconscious desire, unfortunately. And yeah. So that rebel, when they're awakened, it's unmistakable. You never have to guess whether
Who the rebel is.
or no, the awakening. You don't have to guess the awakening. It is beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, there are, of course, different layers and levels. You can get to one place and, oh, I'm awake now. And then all you end up doing is seeing the multitude of layers that are still on top of more awakening. So that's, yeah.
You think you've seen enough or pretty much all of it, and then all of a sudden another monster lie comes over the horizon and you think,
Exactly.
I'm not done yet.
Exactly. Yeah.
So go ahead.
I was going to say the monster lies in here are way bigger.
Okay, yeah. Yes.
The way we lie to ourselves is infinitely bigger. It's mirrored from the world out there, but this is a more valuable focus. This is where we can actually get traction. And the rebel definitely needs to start that inward journey and be able to reflect.
Absolutely. Yeah. I must admit, I'm going on that journey myself. In the last 2 years, I've said to myself, right, enough of this angry energy. Let's just channel it somewhere. I know I can add value. So it's about business. It's about business community and entrepreneurialism and starting something that's going to help others transform their lives. Having done loads of personal development, very, very bog standard stuff, Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins, all that good stuff, I realized, that's 101 personal development, but it's very valuable nonetheless, because at least you do start to think, okay, that's a negative thought, it's critical thought. It's good if it serves you, but not so good if it's negative self-talk. So changing some of those limiting beliefs and things that you get entrenched in is a struggle for many. And I know that I've been tackling quite a few in the last few years, just trying to redirect this energy. So you say in your book that entrepreneurialism is as close to freedom as you can get without leaving society altogether. And you describe entrepreneurs as the best rebels. What does the rebel archetype look like in someone building a freedom business, especially someone over 40, perhaps who's worked a lot and is done with the 9 to 5 and is finally betting on themselves?
Well, that's so interesting because what the rebel would look like is the warrior, which is the next archetype that all of that personal growth and finding the purpose of the cause and what the fight is really about and for, that moves you into the work. And that's when people say freedom business, it's more like slaving to purpose.
Got it.
Right? So if we're going to be a slave, we're kind of on slave planet here. And that's what I decided. If I have to be a slave, then I slave to my purpose. I slave to my calling. I slave to what I feel to be, the divine, the creator asking of me. And so it's not a cakewalk by any stretch of the imagination that right? How much time and energy do you have to put in to get something from nothing? That's more the alchemist jumping ahead on the hero's journey. But it's the brick by brick building one thing at a time. One of my favorite talks ever, which I can't remember the speaker, he said that you can be an overnight success in 25 years.
I think it could have been Jim Rohn, or it could have been, I can't remember his name now, but yes, somebody like him. Yeah, amazing.
Very humble, very successful. So that's, it always requires that. It's kind of why it's a good time to start now rather than later, because every bit of work that you put into it is going to continuously teach you. And, you can't create in a vacuum. I actually just ran a 12-week course called Creator Code, teaching people how to access their creative spirit from a place of freedom, not just trying to manifest and have what you want and have everything turn out your way at all, although that stuff can happen, but for actual freedom, where, it's life or death freedom. It's success or failure freedom. It's the freedom that exists throughout all of those kind of states. And so once you get to work, the biggest thing, can I swear on your show?
Yeah, by all means, go ahead.
So once you get to work, your shit comes up like nothing else, right? It's going to trigger you at every turn. Oh my goodness, I'm winning. That's a kind of trigger. People love that kind of trigger. But oh my goodness, I'm losing. Oh no, I'm losing. Right? It's the entrepreneur's life is, at least for me, it's been like this. And so it invites you to do the work unconditionally and to start to, I'm sure you've heard this before, but start to be less attached to the outcome and more attached to your purpose.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the process, once you've developed and fine-tuned the process, be slave to a process, because that itself is going to serve you. And I've definitely found that in the past.
Exactly.
Just a quick break from the podcast. If you've ever wondered whether there's a business hiding inside you, then maybe my Sovereign Business Blueprint, which is free, might be able to help. All you have to do is answer a few questions about your skills, hobbies, passions, interests, and values. And what it does is it turns into a custom report just for you. It will show you the market you might be able to enter into, who you're going to help, where to find the market, how you're going to help them, the kind of business models that might apply and might float your boat because they align with your values. It will show you some of the strategies on how to reach them, and it will give you some brand ideas and also a few next steps to help you along your way. So go to Unplugged and Unstoppable, look for the Sovereign Business Blueprint. You can't miss it. It's on the homepage. Answer a few questions, click submit. And that custom report, it's about 25 pages, will be in your inbox within 5 minutes. I hope you like it. I hope you take the test. Let's get back to the podcast. So I'm going to just quickly signpost. You do a quiz on your website where you get to discover who is your leading archetype. And so we're going to mention that at the end of the show. But just in case listeners are getting curious here, like how do I find out my archetype, you'll find it on Beth's website, and we'll signpost that later. So I want to ask you now about the nurturer chapter, which hit me hard, especially the nurturer's high, where you're running on the joy of helping others whilst quietly burning out. You say the key is to turn the nurturance on yourself first. So for women or guys who spent decades giving everything to everyone, family, causes, communities, what does that actually look like in practice?
To have good boundaries as a nurturer, do you mean? What is it?
Yeah,
look like?
I guess it's like turning inwards and looking after yourself as a matter of protection.
Exactly. So one of the big dilemmas for the nurturer archetype, I call me or them. And it sets up a dichotomy. There's many dichotomies in our psyche that either I look after myself now or I look after you. And those two roads never meet. In that, also another name for the pendulum swing or those polarities. So nurturers, typically, they either are giving everything to everyone or they cloister off, isolate, and they only give to themselves. Both of those are not true and not healthy for those nurturers. They're both a place of misery. Like you said, when you're giving all to everybody, then you are going to fall down one way or another. You're going to, come up hungry. You're going to come up uncared for. You'll neglect your health. You won't exercise, whatever it is that you would need to keep going to feed your own soul, your own essence. And then when you swing back into only taking care of yourself, it's a total spit in the face of the nurturer's purpose to serve and help. And then so the true overcoming for the nurturer is to dissolve this me or them. And one of the ways that I did that for myself was realizing that when I go to work, it has to be of mutual benefit. So with the deprogramming coaching that I do, it is entirely enlivening. 99.9% of the time when I'm either teaching a course or coaching one-on-one or doing a group, I come away from it with more energy than I started. And this was,
Is that because you've engineered the pleasure, or you just chose it because you set it up that way so that it would give you that pleasure?
It's not pleasure, although it's not necessarily pleasureless, but it's that life energy that you can start to observe. Am I gaining it or am I losing it? Is it draining or is it growing? So and it can be a pleasure, but it's not always, because there's people are coaching on things that they've been through, like we talked about. Could be very horrific abuse. It's not a pleasure. If there's any pleasure in it for me, it's that people are growing and taking the risk, and that's a very beautiful thing. So my lover hedonist kind of likes that. But yeah, the mutual benefit is that the coaching process, and now I train coaches as of 2020, by the way, which is a very big shift for me. Your client, the person that you're working with, will benefit from you doing the work with them. Not that you tell them that. It's a totally personal, private thing, but I can guess at why, creating a bigger field or something like that. I don't use that terminology. It just works better when everybody involved is doing the work together. It facilitates, because then you never step into that place of being on a pedestal. I'm good, I'm healed, and now you have to do the work. It's like, no, we are all in this together all the time. Keeps you humble. It keeps you in your own process.
That's very balancing. You mentioned the hedonist. It's another archetype, and I think most people misread it, I guess, because you distinguish between empty pleasure and purposeful pleasure. So you say empty pleasure leaves you hungry. It's not purposeful pleasure. Can you explain that a bit further?
For sure. So that's the main shadow of the hedonist archetype. The lover came before, just in case anyone's watching the order, but it slides very easily into the lover, the hedonist. And then so that main shadow is emptiness. And in a way, now I'm kind of rethinking this a little bit too, because the emptiness is very potent. If you don't get to that place of being able to feel the emptiness of our mechanical lives, then you can't grow. So it's a gift to be able to see it. But if you just unconsciously try to fill the emptiness and you don't let yourself feel it, and you think, oh, it'll be the next job, or it'll be the next, business partner, or it'll be the next vacation, or it'll be the next project, or you always think it's going to be the next thing, or the booze and drugs, or the whatever it is that you hunger to fill that emptiness, then it literally makes you more empty, right? When you escape, you are expanding the escapeness or the emptiness. Yeah. Right? Like what you run from, it's another way to say what you resist persists and grows.
That's awesome. And how many archetypes were there again in total?
8 in total. And
8 in total.
Then there's 5 that I didn't write about that are also present at all times in the hero's journey. I call them the primal archetypes. I have a course on these ones. It's the child, one of the primal. There's the child at every stage of the hero's journey. You never get away from that. Then there's the victim and the prostitute and the saboteur and the masculine feminine, which I consider to be one.
Interesting, because I was going to ask you about that one next. You came out of this process as a self-described recovering feminist, which takes courage. You're not anti-women, you're pro-wholeness. Do you want to expand a bit more on that?
Nice. I like how you said that. Yeah, so it was the passing of my father that brought my awakening to, I thought I was in a fight against men my whole life until then. And then, of course, my father represented the primary masculine in my life. And I worked so closely with him. And when I discovered that battle was right here inside myself, that I was hating my own masculine, I had a period of redemption. And all of that illusion fell away. I saw the psyop of feminism, how it had damaged women, it damaged the family. Of course, it damaged men because they became such a target for these women. And then, so it was a totally new day I'm not going to claim perfect healing around that. In fact, I had a recent example that shows me there's still more. But, I can never sit on a pedestal again and say that everything in the world wrong is due to men. And I firmly believed that before. I bought the propaganda. I owned it. I took it inside and made it my own, let's say. And there was a time where I worked almost exclusively for women, especially business coaching, helping them. And then that's when the King Hero's Journey podcast was born, when I had this redemption. I couldn't go back. I couldn't even apologize to my father for all of the ways that I had attacked him, but I wanted to support men in a way that I hadn't before. So that's where that podcast came from.
Yeah, brilliant. You coined the term merpreneur, and you describe how discovering the mermaid archetype in yourself after your dad died in 2015 was almost comical at first and then profound. You write about planting a flag in that archetype. What does that mean? What does that mean consciously?
So now how I'm seeing it, right? Like everything evolves over time. The king hero and the merpreneur are the same, but obviously different sides of the masculine feminine, right? The merpreneur, mermaids being much more, I could not, what do they call the mermen? No, we're not going mermen. Absolutely not. That would just be dead wrong. And so it was really out of the devastation of my father's death. Again, it's funny how many times this is coming up in this archetype. He might be in the zone here. That I was able to, let me see if I can get it, that, it's through the grieving process, basically. I don't identify really strongly with this story anymore, so forgive me. I'm now piecing it together. But in the healing process, I was visited by now what I know to be probably demonic entities, right? So, but at the time, I'm pretty innocent and I'm grieving, and I was praying to God for a way to move forward in my life because my life had fallen apart. It's a devastation. You might know when your parents pass, and I'm going like, okay, how do I come back into the world? And in the nightly vigils, I would hold with myself and praying and just like, what next? It was a real blank slate. Even though I'd healed from the loss to a great extent, I still had no idea how to go and be a person, especially in public anymore. And that's when I started being visited by what I interpreted to be mermaids. At the beginning, I had no idea. It was just impressions and symbols, movements, the feeling of being in water. I would come around a corner, see the flip of a tail, and I couldn't invent this stuff because I'd never had a mermaid fascination as a child. I didn't care for all of that kind of cartoony stuff. It spoke nothing to me. And then all of a sudden I'm going like, wait a minute. Is this mermaid energy? Because I'm piecing it all together. And then so I built my first way to come back into the world around this mer energy. And the mermaid is like, very gifted, as an archetype we're talking right now. It's highly gifted, usually damaged, having been through a lot of loss and tragedy and injury. And in order to come into and really inherit those gifts, the healing has to be done. And so the mermaid is gifted with the ability to go very deep into the unconscious.
I see.
And fearlessly navigate, because nobody's like that. Nobody wants that, right? That's going to discover pain and suffering and consciously suffer rather than, suppress what we consider to be more comfortable, but it's not at some point at all. And then I broke down that, the merpreneur, it's a cluster of it's a cluster of archetypes. It's a complex archetype. Like any real figure in life, we are all complex clusters. And so it turned out that there was 8 archetypes within that mermaid. And because I was very focused as a business coach at the time, then I invented the word merpreneur.
Very good.
Yeah. And I created my first courses. And at first I felt like a lunatic. I really did. It was just like, I couldn't almost take myself seriously, except I was getting so much feedback. And people were able to relate, and they could find these archetypes inside themselves too. And I'm like, I'm onto something here.
Exciting.
And I created a course around that. I started to actually experiment with other people and run them through the training. They all were able to find themselves on this journey. And then again, when my mom passed nearly 2 years later, that was when I had the awakening that, is this the hero's journey, not just a soup of archetypes? Is there a meaningful sequence? I read a book about the hero's journey, and that's when I started to go, oh, okay, like put mine to the test here. It was literally in 5 minutes, I found the whole sequence of those archetypes, and I placed myself in that journey. So the big gift that I received immediately is not knowing who I am, but knowing where I am.
Yes. So you talked about the lover being just after or before the hedonist. Was that right?
Exactly.
So I'm guessing when you take your test or you go through the report or understand it a bit more fully, you get to learn which part of the sequence you're in.
Yep, that's it. So, it is important to know who we are and to understand our gifts and know the shadows, what we're vulnerable to in negative patterns and that kind of thing, or positive patterns. But knowing where you are is priceless, because then you know what is behind you that might be still some what do they say? Some luggage from the past, unfinished business, I think is the term I'm looking for. And then you get to see what's ahead of you, and you know where you're going. You have a map. And it was amazing, because you know what happened in that moment? I found myself particularly in the hedonist archetype. I was in a comfort zone. Things were going well. My business ran with not very much input. I didn't have to work very hard at all, because I had been already putting a lot of work into it over the years. But here I am in the comfort zone, not really growing, not expanding, not challenging myself. And then so who's up ahead of the hedonist is the king.
And tell us about the king, because I've not got any notes on the king.
Okay.
Let's hear him now.
Okay. Yeah, definitely a him. You're right. At first, because of my feminist roots, I wanted to make that the queen. It's not the queen. Absolutely not. If there's a queen on the hero's journey, it's in the alchemist. It's one of the sub-archetypes of the alchemist. Very different. So the king is this masculine energy that's tasked to lead the kingdom, to get out in front, to take much greater responsibility than the hedonist would want to. And it's the hedonist finding the pleasure of purpose rather than just always chasing acquisition or sensation or some kind of thing they could have. It is finding that the depth of knowing why you get out of bed every morning. So yeah, a lot more work and responsibility for the king, a lot more stress. But what did they receive in return is the power.
Your whole coaching model is built on the idea that most business coaches look outward to the market, but you look inward first to the person's sacred purpose. Every problem is a case of mistaken identity, you say. Can you explain what you mean by that and how you actually help someone to find it using the real identity?
Well, that's a very big, deep subject. And so identity is something that is ultimately an obstacle. And when you do enough work to de-identify from that which is not the real you, then you can start to use identity more of a tool of connection. And so the archetypes are very useful for that, because you see that right away. It's kind of like a scripture that has so much information packed into a very small amount of, like words or ideas. And so then you can learn so much about yourself by seeing the dynamic and the pattern of an archetype. And it's pretty fascinating, because you get one little nugget and see yourself, say, in an over-giving nurturer, and that you get burned out helping people. And then you look in and you go, oh, wow, this whole thing, it's like an accordion folder. It opens, expands, and then you'll get to see so many more parts of yourself. Not that it's telling you who you are. It's just going, oh yeah, right. Is that the nurturer? Oh, and that's the nurturer, and that's the nurturer. I ended up with a whole entire course on this archetype, because it's just so big. There's so much data in that one. And then the identity is something that you can use to serve from freedom, not because like you have to wear this identity as a helper, and that's how you feel to be a good person, or you feel good enough, or that's often the shadow with that nurturer archetype who wants to be good enough and seen as good enough in the eyes of others. They want to please people. They want to be approved of so they can ultimately survive. And so identity is very expensive energetically. When we identify with anything, with our body, with our senses, especially with a pattern in our life, with thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, all of that. The identity is what holds it in place, where otherwise that energy would just flow and come as needed and not represent any loss. So having, it can be very, very subtle. And so it does require that inward journey to find what's not you, which is mostly everything. And then you can start to use that more as a tool by conscious choice as a way to be in the world. And so everybody's at a different place when they've come to me for business coaching. Some people don't have enough self-concept. They haven't developed that enough yet. And they need to build that up. And then there's other people that had developed excess self-concept. And they need to start letting that go.
Understood.
And to me, the best identity that is no identity at all for a business is authenticity, right? Being yourself and being true, being honest, being brave enough to show yourself. I could easily just keep my mistakes in the past. Nobody's going to worry about it or talk about it or, and then just move forward and construct some identity around that. But no, all of these experiences really truly did form who I am at some level. And those stories are often of use to other people, that they see themselves where they can overcome challenges that I did as well. And so that's what engenders true connection. That's why people will want to work with you in the first place, because you're just being yourself. There's no pretense. Yeah. So that's a pretty big answer. It's a very big subject.
I absolutely love it. This is definitely the core of this interview is right there. So I really appreciate that, Beth. Now let's move on, shift gears slightly. Living it and in the truth community. You referenced the growing truth movement throughout the book, and you distinguish the awakened lovers in that space as the ones who are inspiring action and hope versus those that just spread hopelessness. So for the conscious rebels listening who are awake to the system but struggling to stay energized, what's the alchemist's antidote to that despair?
Okay. Well, if we say going back to the lover, where the obsession with lies can consume people. That's what I notice in the truth and freedom movement. And it's not everybody by any stretch of imagination, but there's a big pocket of that. And so they're busy really, being angry, and they spend all their time to research and find out what the next latest psyop, it's not really an assassination, it's really a staging and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting, right? It's good to be able to develop those skills of researching and discrimination to a point. But if it turns into an obsession and a compulsion that you can't not do that, and you're constantly seeking negative impressions, you want to, you're studying all of the things that are wrong, and that's constantly impressing you, meaning you'll be toxic with all of that stuff. So it's not about looking away and pretending things aren't happening, but I was actually just listening to, I'm reading The Fourth Way, Gurdjieff's The Fourth Way, and he was talking about these impressions and how we have to be really protective over what we allow to impress us, because all of that needs to be contended with. We need impressions, but the negative impressions are going to be a very bad ongoing problem. We won't grow from that place. Now, the awakened lover actually values the truth and sees the beauty in the truth, no matter how much you don't want that truth, right? When you learn truths about yourself, it's painful, it's intense, it's, like I had a little taste of that the other day, just coming clean with someone. I ended up apologizing for my behavior because I said something that I shouldn't have said. And the pain was enormous. It stopped me in my tracks. I had to sit and do nothing but be in pain and be real with that pain, be truthful and honest with myself about that pain. And then the healing and the growth can happen from it, rather than go into just trying to justify, well, I did that because I'm so smart, or I'm, whatever. And, so yeah, if you're struggling to stay energized, it's a sign that there is a drain of energy happening. And to me, the fastest way to find that drain is number one, to recognize the archetypal pattern. Number two is to allow the feelings that exist around it to come to your awareness, not so you think about them, but you actually have a lived experience. You allow yourself to suffer in that way. And then what I've picked up from the work of Lester Levinson in particular is to find the rooting programs. And there are a discrete number of programs. This is the transformational part, because you can study feelings and archetypes all day long, it would be the slowest path to only let go at that level. Once you get to the programs, then you're dealing in the unconscious, and you'll be able to find these, discrete number of programs. It's not complex, but it's intense. They are the biggest pains that you could ever have because they represent a loss of love, a loss of control, a loss of oneness, and a loss of life, death itself. So it's for the brave souls that really are willing to go to the end of the earth. And the beauty is that the way that this has been organized or created by our creator, there is freedom on the other side of every program without fail. I've never, ever not discovered that. And I've proven this with the hundreds of people that I've worked with as well. So yeah, how to stay energized is to find the loss of the energy ultimately in the program that roots the archetypes and all of the problems that might be patterned.
What an amazing message.
Did that answer your question?
In our sphere, in our social circles and circles, it's really valuable message, that one. So you end the book with journey, not so you can show other people how great you are, but so you can show others how great they are. That feels like the whole mission of this book in one sentence. What would you want someone listening right now, someone who knows they're meant for more but hasn't found the way in yet, to know about where to start?
So I'm going to use a Gurdjieff word because I'm so full of that stuff right now. I'll use his term self-remembering. And so that is an invitation to self-study, to self-honesty, to conscious suffering, to coming out of denial, to learning to value the things about yourself that we haven't been taught to value, the life that we are, that is coming through us, to let go of the need for others' approval, and to let go of the need for others to disapprove of you, which can be a mirror experience, like the rebel that we share in common. To want freedom. This is actually the very big gift of Lester Levinson, that we forget to want freedom, even though there might be some lip service to it. Right? I might say that, oh yeah, freedom, freedom, and yell it from the rooftops and in the demonstrations that would happen here. But when you actually desire freedom, and you desire it more than you even want to live, than you even want to protect your own life, that's the opening that life can come through. That is self-remembering. And so, it's the work of a lifetime, but you get results immediately. You start to see, oh, I'm not who I thought I was. And the natural desire to serve comes up. I never have to tell anybody, oh, you should be helping other people. Like, it doesn't work anyway, and I'm not going to say that. But it's through the deprogramming, through letting go of layers of what's not you, that the natural urge to serve and create comes up. And it's less about my identity as a creator, as just being a vehicle, which is kind of a cliche in our world, but it's letting that happen through you.
That's awesome. I think, the last two answers you've given, or three, have been so poignant and perfect for this interview and for the audience. I think probably both our audiences. So I'm delighted to have got the chance to find out exactly how you would answer those questions, Beth. So we're reaching the end of the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. So I've got to ask you then, where can people find you and take the test, take the quiz, give our audience some insights on how to reach your work and what's there?
So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. You're obviously deep and your questions were fantastic. And so yeah, I really appreciate being here. And if people would like to follow up, and they can find a copy of my book at my website, bethmartens.com. You can find my archetype quiz, the King Hero quiz, just by scrolling down on that homepage. Or I can, if you like, Robin, I can send you a direct link to that quiz page as well. Like you said earlier, it takes about 10 minutes to answer questions. Don't obsess about the answers. You want the first answers rather than the thought of answers, because archetypal energy comes from a place much more deep than our thoughts. And this archetype can change over time. So you can always do that quiz again I don't do it every week, but periodically, to see how are you progressing on the journey. It comes along with 10 videos describing the gifts and the shadows of each of the archetypes. Almost everybody says, oh yeah, I was the warrior, but I can see myself in all of them. And that's the truth of it. So, but the quiz is designed to help you pick one place to begin, because if you have no place to begin, you won't begin. And then, so that's why, I've got 4,500 people who've done this quiz already, and some of them come back and do it again. Now, the deep work, if you're really interested, as you already mentioned, I do have a 2 beginners course. One is Deprogramming 101, the basic skills and tools of navigating your emotions and the programs, and how to actually release them. And then the Find Your Sacred Purpose is the same exact work in Deprogramming and Archetypes, but for the sake of finding out, why are you here? What are you here to do? How are you here to serve? What is that essence? And dispelling the myths about purpose, which are very, very deep and a big obstacle. I was going to mention, if you don't mind, we've got a course coming up right on the horizon, so I'm not sure when your podcast is coming out, but it might be in time for it. This is in partnership with a teacher of Gurdjieff's work. So that's, his name came up, yeah. And I have the great pleasure, Micah Ellers, he is a filmmaker and he's an acting coach. But more than any of that, he is in fact, you probably love to talk to him, by the way, if you're looking for any more interviews. So together we're teaching a course called The End of the False Self. And it's about letting our false personalities go. It's no little thing. This is not necessarily a beginner course, but if the will for freedom is there, then a beginner could benefit. And so that's coming up starting May 9th. And one last thing, if you don't mind if I say that in September, I'm going to be running my 7th Journey Code coaching training, where I'm teaching others how to become adept at leading others through a deprogramming process. Amazing. To find inside themselves the patterns, the shadows, to learn how to feel, which is a lot of people's Achilles heel. And then to be, like I said, it has to be of mutual benefit. So they're doing their work as they are learning to help others do that. It's a 7-month training. It's a very big process and a big commitment. I do it by application only. So if anybody wants to look into that, the early bird is going to be on until, I believe, August. And so it's a good time to look into that. It's going to be more affordable for right now. Yeah, that's a big journey. Those students make the biggest progress of all, because they are investing themselves so greatly. I
can imagine. And I did forget, Beth, that you were speaking at an Acapulco 5 years in a row, right. which is an event I've been following. I've been following Jeff Berwick for years and years and years. When he first had Eric Dubé on as a guest, I think that was 2014 or 15. I've been following him since then, and really wishing I could be out there in Acapulco, maybe one day. So Beth, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. I've learned so much. Your book is amazing. Beth Martens, so BethMartens.com is where to find Beth's work. You've been definitely unplugged and unstoppable, Beth. It's been a pleasure. Until next time, folks, see you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you.
I was running through the years with my head down low, chasing every sign that said I had to go. Tried on 1,000 lives that weren't my own, searching for a place I could call home. Then I heard a voice in the quiet night, saying slow down now, you're alright. And in the stillness, something clicked inside, like the missing piece had been by my side. And all the roads I walked before were leading me right back to the start. I'm coming home to me. Yeah, I finally see the light I was chasing was inside of me. Every scar, every fall, every memory was guiding me back to who I'm meant to be. feels lighter than it did before. I don't need to prove, I don't need to run. I remember now, I was never done. Every wrong turn, every open road was shaping the truth I already know. I'm coming home to me. Yeah, I finally see the strength I was searching for lies in me. Every doubt, every fear, every memory was clearing the way for clarity. I feel it now, this is where I'm free. I've come home, I've come home to me. Oh, I feel it in my bones tonight, like the stars aligned and the time is right. No more running from who I am. I stand right here, right where I stand. I'm coming home to me. Yeah, I finally know I don't need the world to tell me where to go. Every step I took, every high and low